You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, last week's guests included President Jimmy Carter, and the week before that, Anita Hill was here. These are hard acts to follow, but our guests today can handle that, being seasoned in audacity, depth, and commitment to change. The woman who broke the all-male hegemony of a major sport, she's now called the First Lady of Boxing. A prize-winning, best-selling novelist who makes military sexual trauma and PTSD come alive in fiction. And the scientific researcher whose findings are at the very heart of all the current headlines on campus sexual assaults. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. As the world now knows, and the world's headlines reflect, on April 14th, a militant Islamist extremist group in Nigeria called Boko Haram kidnapped approximately 300 girls from their school in a remote corner of northeastern Nigeria, and has made clear they are going to use them and or sell them as sexual slaves. Some of the girls managed to escape. One 16-year-old, as reported by the Associated Press, said that when the men first came, they reassured the schoolgirls, saying nothing bad will happen to you. But when they set fire to the school and started shouting, Allahu Akbar, God is great, the 16-year-old student said, we knew. She and some others jumped off the trucks as they were being herded into the trucks and hauled away, and hid in the bush. She said, I ran and ran and ran. I had no time to be scared. I was just running. When this first broke at all, and it broke online, I wrote a post on Facebook saying, when hundreds of schoolgirls are kidnapped in Nigeria, or anywhere else for that matter, why is the Security Council not going into immediate emergency session, as well as NATO, as well as CETO, as well as the African Union? Why is the United States not scrambling its jets and dropping SEALs and Rangers into the area to find and rescue the girls? What better purpose could such organizations and such military be put to than this one? But, of course, it's taken time for any of that to filter through to the world's concern. Also, the concern is expressed in interesting and sometimes disturbing ways. So I wanted to give some context from Sisterhood is Global and from the Nigerian section. There were women rulers in this region before it was Nigeria. A 15th century ruler of the Hausa kingdom, Amina, who maintained control for 34 years, established peace. There was a Yoruba. Women of the Oyo kingdom held high political rank. Igbo women had a role in traditional politics as well. And the usurpation of women's functions by the British colonial forces was the main cause of the Women's War of 1929, called Ogu Umunwanyi. The British historians call it the Aba riots. The war was triggered by a census and property count in the Owendri province. The previous census had resulted in taxes for men, and women organized to prevent taxation of their property. They obtained guarantees that they wouldn't be taxed, and they forced the arrest and conviction of one official who had assaulted some of the women. When the news spread, tens of thousands of women descended on their local native administration centers, that's what they were called, their indigenous form of protest, dancing, chanting, singing songs of derision and ridicule, and their demands for the warrant chief's caps of office totally overwhelmed the British. The women demolished and burned 16 native courts and released prisoners in several jails, and in 2 cases, police and soldiers fired on them, killing over 50 women and wounding another 50. So it's interesting what comes in with colonialism. Now, the Nigerian leader of Boko Haram, Mr. Abu Bakr Shekau, sent a video. He said education must end, girls must be married, we are going to give their hands in marriage because they are our slaves. They will be given as rewards to Boko Haram fighters. We will marry them out, he added, at the age of 9. We will marry them out at the age of 12. We will sell them in the market, by Allah. Some people translate Boko Haram as meaning Western education is bad, but it actually means education is bad. And that drove me to Virginia Woolf. Oddly enough, that a tragedy involving young girls in Nigeria should send me to a white woman, dead now, in the early 20th century, a genius, one afflicted by possibly schizophrenia and certainly bipolar disorder, and a survivor of child sexual abuse herself. But I thought about Three Guineas, and I thought about A Room of One's Own, her two greatest essays, and how they both focused on education for women. I also thought about Malala, who took a bullet in the brain in Pakistan for daring to want to be educated. Woolf makes the connections between education and economics and war. That education basically gives one the desire to be fully human. And that in turn requires economics because it requires independence to define how one wants to be human. And one can only effect war, that is, the end of it, if one has the power of independence. She points out that Oxford and Cambridge once did not admit women. She also points out that until this is done, there will never be peace. So, in a strange way, she understands, and so does the leader of Boko Haram, the connections between education, economics, and war. He cannot continue to have war if women are empowered and independent and educated. In a strange way, all of us are fighting for our freedom from Boko Haram. I'll have more to say on this subject at the end of the program, in Fighting Words. And now it's time for our first guest. One of the things I love about doing this program is that it nudges me to go into areas that I wouldn't normally examine in my desire to present to you the voices of a whole vast panoply of different women who are fighting for themselves and other women. Well, this next guest comes from an area that I wouldn't normally have examined. A film was made of her life called Against the Ropes, and she was played by Meg Ryan. Here is the First Lady of Boxing, Jackie Kallen. Welcome, Jackie, to the program.
Well, thank you. It's exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm impressed to be talking to the First Lady of Boxing, as you've been called. You're a oneer. You're a one and only. I have to start right at the top by confessing that I am a total ignoramus where boxing is concerned. And it has seemed to me for years to be the ultimate, macho, patriarchal sport, except when they did it back in Greece and it was all the beauty of the body, whatever. But until women began
it's still the beauty of the body.
Okay.
When's the last time you watched a fight?
Not on very, maybe ever.
Okay.
Okay.
No, the bodies are still beautiful.
Okay.
The training and what goes into preparation for the fights. These athletes are very, very well toned, very well defined with their muscles, and they're very pretty.
Well, the Greeks certainly were into that, and my son of late has become interested in boxing. He who was always a baseball overall fan has become interested in boxing. So, but as long as there are women involved, then my ears perk up. You were the first woman manager, really, and maybe still the only one, or certainly the most famous one. A movie was made about you, Against the Ropes, with Meg Ryan. How did you get into this?
You know what? It was kind of a fluke the way things work out in life, but I was a journalist for many, many years. I wrote for a daily newspaper, and I started out covering entertainment and sort of segued into adding sports to my beat, so to speak. So I interviewed whatever high-profile athletes.
Right.
And along the way, I got very interested in the sport of boxing. But I think I kind of felt that boxing was just a metaphor for life. You know, it was one against one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to beat the odds. You can get knocked down, but you get back up again. You have to have the right people in your corner. Started seeing a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why I liked it, because it just represented life to me. Because I've been knocked down, believe me, like we all have. You know, I have a husband that walked out after 30 years. I have 3 heart stents. I have glaucoma. I have a bleeding ulcer. I mean, we all get hit with things in life.
My God.
You know, and it's how you deal with those things.
Resilience.
And, you know, just resilience, exactly. And that's what I saw in boxing. The fighter that had the most resilience, who could really gut it out, is the one that won at the end. And the guy who got knocked down and just laid there was out. So I found it to be, you know, a very enlightening sport.
But what's amazing about you is that you took it into the real world, and you made your managerial debut with a heavyweight boxer, and then you managed your first that was in 1988, and you managed your first champion in 1991. You took him to the world middleweight title. That was James Toney.
Correct. And that was quite a feat at the time, because you know, we're talking over 20 years ago. And number one, a woman managing a guy fighting for a title was very, very rare. And we were a 20-1 underdog. Nobody gave us much of a chance of winning at all. I think a lot of people in boxing were figuring, oh, well, she's going to get her fighter knocked out and we'll never see her or him again.
Well, it's quite a testosterone poisoned atmosphere for you to walk into. I mean, did they fall over sideways? And I bet they had their laughs, their bitter laughs, and didn't make life easy for you.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I started, it was 88, 98. Well, it's like 25 years ago. You know, I had writers saying to me, boxing writers, well, why don't you put on a bikini and hold up the ring card between the rounds?
Oh, my God.
That would be perfect for you. You know, and I just remember thinking to myself, that's probably what most men think. And then, of course, there were always the people that thought, oh, is that guy your boyfriend? Is that why you're doing this?
Sure.
Do you like this guy?
Sure.
And I mean, I'm married with 2 children in college, and that's the last thing I'm thinking about is these fighters in a romantic way. I've been doing it now, like I said, about 25 years, and always looking for that next champion, because you just don't know. You know, there could be some young kid in gym in a really bad neighborhood who's unusually gifted, and all he needs is, you know, the right manager to put him up on top. And when you get to the top, it's very rewarding. There's a lot of money at the top.
What do you look for when you say you're looking for the next champion? What makes a champion?
Well, for me, I've kind of broken it down into 3 things. So if I find all 3 things, I sign the kid. If it's only 2, maybe, but usually not. If it's only 1, never. But the first thing I look for is talent, that innate ability to fight. Because some guys are just born, women too. Some people are born to fight. They have that coordination, they have that hunger, they have that ability to time a punch where it hits the opposite person exactly at the right moment in the right place. And you can't teach that. The second thing is they have to have good discipline. If they don't train well, all the talent in the world is thrown out the window, because if they don't run every day, if they don't spar properly, if they don't eat right, if they don't, you know, get enough sleep, all those things that are part of discipline, if they don't do that, forget the talent. It just doesn't compute. It won't add up.
Right.
But then the third thing is they have to have heart. And you can't teach that either. A kid either has heart, where they will die in the ring. They will get in there and they will fight till the last minute. If a good fighter with good training habits has that, that's what you look for.
Have you ever represented a woman boxer? Because now, of course,
yes,
you have.
I certainly have, yes. As a matter of fact, I was the commissioner for the International Female Boxers Association. So I was the commissioner for all the women that were currently fighting. So I worked with a lot of them, but then I also did manage some on my own. And it's very challenging because a lot of people don't accept the sport. So the poor girls train really hard, and, you know, they take the same risks that the guys do, but not too many people take them seriously.
And the the state of boxing, which of course has been plagued by corruption and the mob and all sorts of things in the past. I know that you've been active and talked about the need for certain kinds of regulations, better training for judges and referees. What do you think needs to be done and regulated more about boxing?
Well, they need a federal, nationally regulated board of people who are experienced in the sport. We need medical people. We need professional judges and referees, and that we could come up with some regulations and rules that everybody abides by. Because right now, every state has their own boxing commission. So what's legal in Minnesota may not work in New York. So you can get away with something in Tennessee because they're not very strict. But then if you take that same situation and put it in Vegas, the fight won't happen. So we need national regulations so that it's uniform.
Is that likely? Is that likely?
I would hope so. It's been talked about for 30 years, but it still has not happened. So, because the corrupt forces in the sport like it corrupt.
And have they ever moved on you were one of the original advocates for implementing pregnancy testing in female fighters. Have they ever?
Yes, they have. Yes, it's now a rule. I'm proud to say that we pushed that through, and every woman before she fights has to be tested because she may be pregnant and not know it, and you get hit in the stomach even in that first trimester when you may not even be aware of the fact. You could have a miscarriage. So we automatically test every woman.
Interesting. Very interesting. I want you to understand, even though it's not boxing, at one point I made it to brown belt. It's a different...
Oh, well, that's pretty good. Karate?
Yes, it was karate. It was taekwondo,
Wonderful.
But it was a long time ago, and probably now if you pushed me with a little finger, I would topple over sideways. Anyway...
Yeah, but at least you learn the discipline of it, and you learn what it takes to bring your body to peak performance. Not everybody has experienced that.
I want our listeners to know that you have come out with a really great book called Between the Ropes, which is available on Amazon.com, where more of this amazing story is. And you're keeping on. It's called Between the Ropes, and it's terrific, as are you. Thank you so much, Jackie, for being with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you, and it's always good to have somebody that asks the right questions, and you did a wonderful job, so thank you.
Thank you. We have to take a short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. And when I come back, I'll be joined by Cara Hoffman, who's a best-selling author and a prize-winning author, and a writer with a talent for going inside the details of women's lives in fiction to memorable detail. Be right back.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Cara Hoffman is the best-selling author of So Much Pretty, which was picked as one of the New York Times Book Review's best books of the year. That was her previous novel. It was about rape in small-town America. She now has a new novel just out called Be Safe, I Love You, about a woman veteran who returns home with major PTSD. And as with all her writing, Hoffman tackles the issue with grace and with gravity. Welcome to the program, Cara.
Thank you, Robin. It's such an honor to be on.
This is a terrific book. Your last book, which was a bestseller, So Much Pretty, was an extraordinary book about rape in a small town. I mean, you have a finger on the pulse of being a woman today in this country, in this culture. And the new book is very special. Talk about the new book.
Well, the new book is about a soldier coming home from Iraq, Sergeant Lauren Clay, who joins the Army in order to get a signing bonus because her family, she's the sole breadwinner for her family, and they're looking at a foreclosure. So she gives up a scholarship to go to a music school and instead goes into the Army. And, she's somebody who has she's very organized and has a, sort of a type A personality, and she's well suited to it, and she has also military folks in her family, so it seems like a good idea. But in fact, she ends up dealing with a sort of greater reality about that decision, that maybe it's not such a great idea in the end.
Well, the timing on this is absolutely amazing, because the country is really waking up to women vets being not cared for in the same way, facing friendly fire from their own colleagues and sexual assault, and then when they come back and with PTSD, not having the same support system. Not that the men have a good one, but the women have it worse. And it's in Congress, and so it's all over the place. I'm so glad that there's a work of art out there as well, because and I know that fiction or poetry, art can go where rhetoric can't.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, for saying that.
Well,
I think
it makes it come alive in a very real way.
Yes, exactly. And I think, most of us, folks who don't come from the military families, our experience of soldiers is what we read about. And, all of our history, we're reading about wars and men as soldiers are certainly topics that are familiar to us. Women as soldiers aren't. And I think that, society is instructed in many ways on how to treat people based on what we read in fiction and what we see in art. So it was really important for me as a woman and as someone who comes from a military family to tell this story in this way.
You wrote an op-ed recently for the New York Times, which also was searing and very important.
Thank you. Yes, I've had a tremendous response to it so far, and I was really, really pleased that they ran it. Essentially it was on some of the same subjects, basically that we need to start seeing women represented in these narratives. We have 3 wars now where women have been serving alongside men in combat, and prior to that, women have always served in some capacity with men, but their stories aren't told, or when their stories are told, what we see is women represented as anything but someone who is on the front lines or who's doing, killing and missing their family and all of the things that soldiers do, which are, of course, all of the things that women do.
That's right. I'm glad to be on the advisory board for SWAN, which is Service Women's Action Network.
SWAN.
Aren't
so
they great?
Good.
Aren't they?
So good.
They really are. They're of all the women's veterans groups, they're the one that is unashamedly feminist. I mean,
absolutely. I cannot say enough good about.
And
about
I've learned so much. I mean, I joke that I have no reason being on the advisory board because I'm on the learning board. I've just learned so much from them. I mean, they are very sophisticated in their tactics on the Hill with Congress, but they also just have such good politics, and they're such amazing women. You must have done a lot of research on this, or did that come in just from being in a military family?
Well, I did do a lot of research. I mean, in addition to, my brother served in Afghanistan, and so it was very close to me, but also, my uncles, my grandfather. But the research that I did actually had to do with more with women veterans. So I spoke, of course, to many women veterans and heard their stories, and the op-ed addresses some of that. And I speak to some women who have had some negative experiences coming back from the war.
Yeah. A guest on this program frequently is Jennifer Freyd, who is a researcher in PTSD and in what she calls betrayal trauma. And she's taken that to the next level of research in terms of institutional betrayal. So that, when a student at a university, for example, experiences sexual assault and then goes to complain, and the university says, "Hush it up, dear, he's a big football player."
Right. Well, clearly this is a problem, too, with what's going on in the military, because you have people who are assaulted by people that they are then reporting to. And the entire structure. Part of the research I did, I guess I should say, in addition to speaking to individual women vets, was with Columbia, a professor in Columbia's epidemiology department. So just to make sure that I had things that were really accurate and was really looking at the issue of PTSD from also a scientific point of view.
I hope we get a copy of this book, which, by the way, I don't think we've said the title. How dare we? Is called "Be Safe, I Love You." I hope that we get a copy of this book in the hands of every member of Congress and the Senate, so that they will understand that Gillibrand's bill is the best way to go on the next time there's a vote. Have we managed to send them all copies?
I don't know that they all have copies of Be Safe, I Love You yet, but that would be wonderful.
I think we should, and since it's a novel, maybe they'll be able to read it. Oh my God, what is next for you? Are you taking a break since the book just came out? But
the book just came out. I'll be doing, of course, a tour, and then I'll be handing in my third novel. So. I'm going to be pretty busy, I think, for the next couple months.
Yeah. This one, Be Safe, I Love You, is already a top 10 BBC book list, right?
Yes, that's right. It's made a lot of good lists so far in the week that it's been out. It just came out last week, and I'm seeing it pop up on all kinds of nice things. And certainly the BBC top 10 was a real thrill.
This is wonderful. And the new novel is already finished.
The new novel is finished. I'm polishing it up, and we'll be handing it in shortly. And
dare we have a hint on about what the new novel is about?
Yeah, the new novel actually deals with some of the same issues that I dealt with in So Much Pretty, and also in Be Safe, I Love You, which has to do with women dealing with institutional violence, and also with class. I mean, I should say that class is also a huge topic of my work, class divide. So it's got similar themes. It's about a group of homeless kids living in Athens, Greece, and one of them is a girl who was raised in the Pacific Northwest by her uncle, who's a doomsday prepper.
Oh, I can't wait. You're churning out. You're going to become the feminist Joyce Carol Oates.
Well, I would love that. I'm thrilled that anyone even said those words. So thank you.
She might be offended that I don't think that she's a feminist, but she, yes, it is. It's a permeable membrane. Now you see her feminism, now you don't. But God love her, she is nothing if not productive.
That's the truth.
So this is terrific. The book is called "Be Safe, I Love You." It follows on So Much Pretty, which was picked as one of the New York Times Book Review's best books of the year it came out. The new one's Be Safe, I Love You. It's out. It's terrific, and thank you for writing it and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. And you have to come back when the next one comes out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robin.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. An April 28th article in the New York Times, written by Douglas Quinqua, had me in stitches and also paying serious attention. So we'll try to be very serious in depicting what is in this article, although it may crack me up at times. So here's the thing. Male researchers possibly would want from here on in to bring a female chaperone into the lab when working with rodents. There's a new study that suggests that rats and mice experience more stress in the presence of men than of women. Rodents left alone in a room with a man, or even presented with a T-shirt worn by a man, have a sharp spike in the stress hormone corticosterone. And corticosterone acts as an analgesic, so consequently the rodents show less response to pain. The rodents show no such reaction to women. They were also less stressed when given a woman's shirt together with a man's. Jeffrey Mogul, who is a psychologist at McGill University and one of the authors of the study, says that the amount of stress felt by the rodents was, quote, massive, and compared with being in a very small tube so the mouse couldn't move for 15 minutes. That would be the equal of the same kind of stress. The findings were published in Nature Methods. I'm trying to be very serious here, and they could have far-reaching, serious repercussions for research, since rats account for more than 95% of all lab animals. If a researcher's gender and sex might affect results, it should be considered an important factor. And the effects might not be limited to living animals. Dr. Mogul went on to say, quote, consider a study on liver physiology. What if those liver cells came from a rat who, at the moment of sacrifice, there's a euphemism, had really high stress levels because it had been sacrificed by a man, or had low stress levels because it was killed by a woman? To reduce such effects, Dr. Mogul recommends that researchers start noting their sex in the method sections of their papers. And he added that the ideal solution would be for the male researchers to sit in the room with the rodents for 30 to 60 minutes before conducting experiments. Yeah, good luck with that, because the stress effects do ease over time. So I'm wondering if this is true of rats. Is it true of everybody who's not male? Like, I don't know, women and girls. And is it even true of other men around men? And is it olfactory? What is it? I hope there are more studies that are done on this, because I think that the fact that I'm trying very hard to, this is science. The fact that the rats get really stressed out when there are men around cannot mean that they're just all feminist rats. It has to mean something more basic and scientific, and I hope that this story will be followed up by more research. But for now, it doesn't go into news, it goes into the surrealism corner. It's time for another short pause. You're listening to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. When we come back, we are going to literally go inside the headlines of the major stories that are promulgating all over the place on campus sexual assault. What's behind it, and what happens if and when she does try to report it. Be right back. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again. Few things are so satisfying as when anecdotal evidence of oppression is gathered by the oppressed peoples themselves, and they cry out and they say, but this is what we experience, this is our reality. And for years and years and years, nobody listens because it's merely anecdotal, and then some principled scholars come along and prove it true. And if the principled scholars are feminists in this case themselves, all the better. Well, Jennifer Freyd, who has been a guest on this program before and who's done extraordinary work on trauma and betrayal and the trauma that comes from betrayal, is now doing new work together with Carly Smith, who is her co-guest this time, on institutional betrayal and the trauma that ensues from that. This could not be timelier. You've all seen, I'm sure, the stories that a White House task force has been convened by President Obama on the epidemic of sexual assaults on campuses across this country. Dozens of universities today, including Columbia, Harvard, Princeton, Florida State, Ohio State, and others, are under federal investigation for their handling, or rather mishandling, of sexual assault. Institutional betrayal, I would even argue, encompasses some recent Supreme Court decisions, which is a betrayal of anti-racism. But in the case of specifically sexual assaults on campus, the irony is that the campus at which Jennifer Freyd and Carly Smith are doing their research, which is the University of Oregon, has recently experienced, guess what, sexual violence, sexual assault, and the university acted in the same way as many universities act, which is not quite believing the victim, the survivor, who testifies, humiliating her, making her feel that the entire investigative process is a second sexual assault, making her doubt her sanity, her reputation in shreds, all the while not so much for the perpetrator. So it is now joining, the University of Oregon will join the other universities on the hot seat. There's an irony in that they have the very researcher and research project on their grounds who could, if they had listened to them, have led the way to a different way of operating. The only hope is that raising this rock and seeing what's been under it will make the kind of change we need. Here are Jennifer Freyd and Carly Smith to discuss their groundbreaking research. And they have been part now, and their findings are part of the White House Task Force, and all to the good. Jennifer and Carly, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You there, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about the next development in this extraordinary trauma research that you've been doing for some time. In this case, you've taken it to the level of institutional betrayal. And talk a little bit about the research itself, both of you, and when you talk, tell us which one is talking.
Well, this is Carly. The way that this research has kind of developed started from Jennifer's work with betrayal trauma within interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. And as we really started looking and thinking about the different ways that we were understanding some of the experiences people were having when they were traumatized, we started realizing that there was often a larger institution involved. You know, a lot of our work is with college students. Jennifer's work had started going into military sexual trauma, and we started realizing that the way people talked about institutions and their relationships, the way they trusted or depended upon these institutions, mm-hmm. we really started to suspect that there'd be parallels between all the work that Jennifer had done with interpersonal betrayal if we started looking at these institutions. Mm-hmm. And that is actually what we have been finding over the past several years. Mm.
It's so interesting because, you know, nobody has thought of this, and yet once you say it, it's I have this, of course.
Yes, we have that experience
reaction.
All the time.
Yeah, and that must, I mean, when a woman, in the military, for example, or on a campus, when a woman reports a sexual assault or whatever, or to the police in a context where the police don't take her seriously, that must compound the trauma, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So in the first study that Jennifer and I did together, we really set out to both measure, you know, whether people would recognize some of the experiences that we expected would be considered institutional betrayal. So if they would be able to indicate that there was an environment in which their sexual assault seemed more likely to occur or not taken seriously if they reported. And then to really look at, in a systematic way, what was the effects of this type of experience on, for example, post-traumatic functioning, so anxiety, depression, dissociation, all those things we know come with a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And we found that, one, people do recognize institutional betrayal, or at least recognize the types of institutional behaviors that constitute institutional betrayal. And then afterwards, indeed, their post-traumatic functioning is quite a lot worse. And so the same way that we've seen interpersonal betrayal lead to worse post-traumatic outcomes, the very same thing seems to be happening with institutional betrayal. Mm.
Yeah, when I go to speak at colleges, I always sort of on the way in from the airport, whoever picks me up, I go through my list of questions that usually involve what can't you say that's going wrong on this campus? Because I actually fly in on my broom. I can't be fired. I can't be suspended. I can't be expelled. I can't be denied tenure. So I say to them, use me. And it's almost always things like, again and again and again, we've complained there's bad lighting in the parking lot and women have been sexually assaulted, or there's no gynecologist on campus, or there's no child care, and we've been trying and trying and trying. But usually it's that something has happened, there's been an outbreak of rapes or harassments or something, and they've gone to the administration, which has said, don't you have a sense of humor?
Right. Well, and Robin, I think you really recognize, and this is Carly again, I think you really recognize your valuable role as an outsider coming in, that you do have more power to speak up, because so often this kind of mistreatment is balanced against the dependency that women or students have on an institution like a college. It's often not the case that it's safe for them to speak up because they really risk losing that membership. I mean, if you look at the parallel, for example, in the military, speaking up has very real and measurable consequences.
Oh, yeah.
But often, in the case of betrayal particularly, it might even be harder to recognize and describe it. If we think about some of Jennifer's work in terms of what she calls betrayal blindness, we have reason to suspect that the very same thing applies to institutions. It's harder to recognize when you're being betrayed at times. That's why we're often so careful to say, they recognize or are able to report the types of experiences that we know constitute institutional betrayal. It's a tricky thing to tease apart sometimes when you're asking people to speak out against the very institutions they're depending upon.
Right. Amazing. Jennifer, the whole arc of this work, it just keeps on keeping on, doesn't it?
It's amazing.
I mean, you've expanded PTS in such amazing ways, starting with sexual abuse in childhood, through betrayal traumas, through long-term betrayal traumas, not a dramatic one-time occurrence necessarily, and now into institutional. How do you keep on doing this? This is amazing.
Well, I think that there's a couple things. One is that I have had the great fortune of being joined by very talented young people. Carly Smith is one of them, and I have other students in my lab, some who are former and some current, and they have so contributed to this research, and it really would be undoable alone because the topic we're dealing with is hard on the heart.
That's what I mean.
It is difficult, but on the other hand, there is great hope that we could understand these problems and figure out ways to intervene and reduce the frequency of betrayal traumas and institutional betrayal and make a substantial difference in our world, because these are problems that can be fixed. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. One of the things we've seen over 20 years of research is that betrayal traumas are very toxic to people.
Yeah.
They hurt, these traumas hurt people physically as well as mentally, and if we reduce the rate of them, we will see great increases in people's well-being. And that really gives us energy, knowing that there is this end goal here to really improve the world.
That it doesn't have to be this way. We can
Absolutely
change it.
Not. This is a fixable problem. We're not devoting the resources we need to fix it. But we're making progress in our understanding. And I think as basic scientists, our goal in my lab is to get as full of a picture and understanding of the phenomena as we can,
right,
as a sort of backbone for then figuring out the best intervention. But recently, in the case of institutional betrayal, we've really been talking more and more with people about some steps that can be taken right now in terms of intervention, because in the case of institutional betrayal, we've got, in a way that's an easier problem to fix, because it's trying to fix families where you've got abuse going on generation after generation for years and years and years. That's a hard problem because families are isolated, and so you might be able to fix one family, but they're all over the place, and it's a hard problem to figure out. But in the case of institutions,
right,
it's much more addressable.
That's right. And didn't you recently, the White House expressed keen interest in your work, and you went to consult with them?
Yes, the last week in March, I was able to speak with a White House advisor who was heavily involved in Obama's new task force. A very exciting development is that in January, President Obama and Vice President Biden announced a task force to focus on ending sexual violence on campus. And this is a huge development for our country.
It is.
They appointed some pretty powerful people and gave this task force a charge to come up with a report in a relatively short amount of time, 3 months, I believe. And so I spoke to one of the White House advisors who's most involved in this report, and was able to tell her about some of our research findings on institutional betrayal.
Oh, this is so useful. I mean, it's applied research now. I mean, it is. Yeah.
I mean, it's both of theoretical interest to us. The concept of betrayal, of institutional betrayal, is a very broad concept that includes all sorts of events and behaviors on the part of institutions that impact individuals.
Yes.
So it includes really things like genocide and public policies that are harmful. But what we've really honed in on is this particular issue of how institutions respond or fail to respond and prevent or fail to prevent sexual assault. Mm-hmm. Because it's a very tangible, very crucial issue that is coming to public awareness.
And it's fixable, too.
It's fixable.
Yeah. Jennifer and Carly, where if people want to learn more, what website could they go to, or how can they find out more about the research?
Well, we have a website just for this research, and it's the address. Well, if you type in institutional betrayal to a search engine, you'll probably get right to us. Yep. But the address is dynamic.uoregon.edu/JJF/institutional betrayal.
Okay, if you got all that down, say it one more time quickly.
Okay, dynamic.uoregon, it's like the state name with a U in front of it, .edu/JJF, that's my initials, /institutional betrayal.
Okay, and if all that fails, you just Google institutional betrayal, and it'll get you to this research.
Yes, it will.
Thank you so much for doing this research, both of you, Carly and Jennifer, and keep on telling us what it is we need to know. This is science of the best possible visionary kind.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin.
One more quick break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still decidedly Robin Morgan. When we come back with fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back, and it's time for Fighting Words. Every time a tragedy of this sort happens, we all act surprised. We all act as if it's an anomaly. We all act as if it couldn't possibly happen. Isn't this shocking and unusual? And I'm going to tediously keep reminding myself and all of us that whether it's the racism expressed by individuals that got the U.S. so excited over the past weeks, or whether it's the abduction of the girls in Nigeria, these are daily events. The institutional betrayal by the Supreme Court is a more severe form of racism in this country than the comments made by Sterling of the Basketball League. And the girls in Nigeria are part of a tragedy that is a larger pattern. The Women's Media Center's own Lauren Wolfe, who's the director of our Women Under Siege project, writing in Foreign Policy Journal this week, did a piece on the Nigerian schoolgirls, and putting it in context, which is that this has happened to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of girls over years in global armed conflict. She offers a short list. 2 teenage cousins, Christine Azat, 16, and Nancy Magdi, 14, kidnapped and then sold in Minya, Egypt in 2011. Just last March, pro-government militiamen kidnapped 4 young women in the Hijer region of southern Darfur and raped them in front of local villagers. Al-Shabaab, a militant group in Somalia, has been engaged in a, quote, free-for-all of armed men preying on women and girls displaced by the famine. That was the New York Times reporting in 2011. The United Nations reported in 2012 that nearly 600 girls and boys as well had been kidnapped, the boys used as soldiers, the girls as sex slaves, by the Ugandan Lord's Resistance Army militia run by Joseph Kony. UNICEF estimated that 12,000 children were abducted by the Lord's Resistance Army between 2002 and 2004 alone. But it's not only Africa. Colombia's armed conflict continues to take the lives of young girls, even though it's supposed to be officially over. The girls are forcibly recruited. UNICEF reported that in 2011, more than 31,000 children were rescued from militias in the Democratic Republic of Congo or escaped from them in the previous 7 years. More than 5,600 underage fighters and slaves were, quote, recruited, that means forcibly, by Sri Lankan armed groups between 2002 and 2007, and there is, Lauren Wolfe points out, no accounting for the hundreds and hundreds of girls abducted and trafficked in Mexico's drug wars. So this is a global occurrence, and it's par for the course. None of that addresses what goes on in the mind of one girl, terrified, in Nigeria. Just now, word comes that more girls have been taken. The government quibbles over the numbers. Some say 5, some say 11. None of that addresses what will be the lifelong suffering, one way or the other, whether she remains as a slave, whether she is rescued, whether she escaped, the trauma that we've talked about earlier in this program, that she suffers for the rest of her life. In a sense, you could say that all our institutions, military, religious, media, government, economic, all our patriarchal institutions are betraying us, and we're all suffering institutional betrayal. But the girls are suffering individual betrayal as well. And the only way to individuate them and bring them back in our minds to the precious, indissoluble uniqueness of each of those girls is to read some names, and I will close with them. There are hundreds, too many for the time that we have on this program. But I can read one name from each letter of the alphabet. And here they are. Aisha Ezekiel, Blessing Abana, Comfort Habila, Deborah Yahona, Esther Ayuba, Fatima Tabji, Glory Yaga, Hadiza Yakuba, Inyi Abdu, Jinkai Yama, Quanta Simon, Laraba Yahona, Malmuna Usman, Naguba Buba, Palmata Musa, Rakia Kwamta, Safia Abdu, Tabitha Hailampa, Yana Bukhar, Zara Ishaku. Their only misfortune was to be born female in a patriarchy. Bring back the girls. And that's our program for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM or visiting us at WMCLive.com for this and for a whole rich archive of all our previous episodes. Be sure to find WMC Live at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor. and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. If you've ever wondered how can we remove the stigma from abortion, or what a district attorney might do when a terrified teenager is just too scared to testify against the man who trafficked her, or what's up anyway with what young women are reading, well, join us next week when we'll explore those and other subjects. Meanwhile, look for us on Facebook and Twitter for alerts about exclusive breaking news segments, surprise upcoming guests, and future shows. Only here on Women's Media Center, live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.